We are working in the salt marsh specifically to address this resilience issue because salt marshes are so profoundly important to the coastline in the UK. There are marshes everywhere in the UK, all through our coastlines, protecting us against waves. They absorb the waves very effectively, they take up the pressure from the waves, preventing erosion, and they provide habitat for birds that we want to go and look at, and of course we've got an obligation politically to protect. There are very, very important policies now in the UK, like the shoreline management protection planning, which is basically deciding what's going to happen to every stretch of coast in the UK to safeguard natural flood protection and artificial flood protection. Our research is underpinning that kind of policy, helping support that policy.
What we've got here is an experimental setup where we've got salt marsh plants in different density plots. So we're looking here at low density, medium density and high density, and we're looking at how the wave forces at this site are affecting those densities of plants' abilities to combine together to create one mass of salt marsh or to remain as individual clumps.
Sometimes marshes dramatically expand or dramatically erode. We can get a marsh disappearing in a couple of years. What causes that? That's a real question, and that's one that Resilcoast has been addressing.
We are in the very, very edge of the marsh, between the sand flat and the sea and the salt marsh. One of the main interests of this project is to try to understand how storms might be eroding or not salt marshes. And taking a lot of data, taking all this data, we have been trying to understand if storms erode marshes a lot or if their role is less important in this sense. And in fact, what we have found is that storms provide a lot of sediment to that marsh, which is very important for the marsh to be keeping pace with sea level rise, for example. Here in this creek, we have some hints of salt marsh erosion. So we were interested in finding if this erosion can be driven by animals grazing. And what we found is that, in fact, erosion rates are a lot lower in those marshes that are grazed. And the reason behind is that animals compact the soil, compact the terrain, and make it a lot less erodible, more difficult to erode by the waves and the currents.
What we're looking at is really the small-scale mechanisms that determine those processes. So from a plant's eye view, how do they actually bind the sediment and prevent erosion and colonise into new areas and so expand salt marsh?
And we are at the mouth of the Neath estuaries, and on the back here you can see a typical example of salt marshes. The salt marshes is the environment that I'm working on, and my PhD is focused on understanding of the role of plants to stabilize the sediment. I expect that with my research we can have a better mechanistic understanding how the plants can affect and can really stabilize the sediment. It could also give us a better understanding what to do in case something is going wrong, in case we need to replant and to regrow some ecosystem, to restore some ecosystem. We can understand which plant will work better in which environment and which plant not. So it will give us more idea of how to deal with the environment, how to live with nature.
I am an interdisciplinary researcher, so I look at bridging the natural and the social sciences. So I look at understanding the importance and the value of salt marshes to society and thinking about how that's managed in terms of coastal management and coastal protection and why they're important for Wales and for Wales in the future, particularly with things like climate change and sea level rise. Another part of my job is to disseminate and engage the public in science. So we work on public events, public exhibitions, and really trying to communicate in an accessible way these key messages that are coming out of our research.
Ultimately, through Resilcoast, we want to inform policymakers and management how best to manage the environment. That's also an economic question, where to invest, in which kind of activities to invest. How valuable are marshes in different parts of the country to people through all of these benefits that we get from nature. We also want to understand how salt marshes underpin people's welfare, this well-being aspects. And we need to know that from a managerial point of view, from a government kind of policy point of view, so that we can set up the best instruments for management of these ecosystems into the future.